some reason, the first two segments of this series disappeared into the ether. I don't know what happened. I can't find my versions of it. And we'll just start over here. Okay, so we're going to talk the origins of Star Trek. They really go back to well before 1964, before Roddenberry became a writer at all. It was like we need to go back really to his childhood. And a bit of a sickly kid. Wasn't the biggest best. He asthma, eyes didn't work right and stuff. He wasn't a very pretty sight, as in his own description. But he found refuge in comics and science fiction stories. So, and I got him through a bunch of that. His parents didn't understand him because he was born in El Paso, but they moved to Los Angeles when he was very little. So, how much connection he felt to Texas, I don't know. But he would play around in his own mind. I don't know, because he did have other siblings. He had a younger brother, Robert, and I think he had maybe a sister too. But for a while, it's like he would play with himself. Again, in a clean family sense, it was like he was just entertaining himself. There's one point he tells a story where he was pretending to be the captain, pilot of a ship or something. He had a second, a soapbox, and another soapbox pulled on top of him. So it was an enclosed vessel. And as he's going along piloting the Cosmos, you can hear his parents outside wondering if last year's asthma resulted in this year's brain damage. Another one where he's supposedly helping the father clean up the garage. Well, actually, the father's cleaning, and he's there facing the firing squad. Bow jest or something. He's like, the Bowman, bullets spun him to the ground. He's there bravely dying. He looks up and sees his dad, kind of like, okay, it's some new kind of seizure I need to know about. That sort of thing. That's the kind of kid he was. And going through, but at one point he was, some teacher accused him of doing something or messing up something. He didn't do it, but it was easier to just cop to it so he can get on with his life type of thing. So that kind of built in a arm's distance relationship with the truth. It kind of, if an easy lie gets you out of a mess, go with the easy lie and get on with your life. Let them worry about it. So that comes in later in life when he's having to deal with people, especially in Hollywood. It actually became a useful skill. But he gets adolescence, and actually the body really did a bit of a miracle of puberty. He grew stronger than normal, and asthma is actually able to be the athlete he dreamt of. But then also, science fiction again kind of came to the rescue. Time how to live your life, exists with these lesser mortals, when he's stronger than anybody else. So it's like, how to not get stupid, And then, gets to high school. At one point he was in there was a high school debating society called the Archons. So, again, magpie mind, always picking these things and storing them for later use. And I think there was something, probably way back when, he think, I want to write some of these stories. I want to do something like that. So that stuff gets instilled early on. So, graduates high school. Not sure what he did immediately after, but he was in his early 20s when World War II hit. So, like everybody else with red-blooded American kid, and his dad went out to World War I. Well, Gene signed off for World War II. He joined the Army Air Corps. Eventually became a pilot in the B-17 in the Pacific. Won the Distinguished Flying Cross, which is no mean feat. I think there was a couple of incidents where some crewmen got bad. He was cleared of all things. It wasn't his fault. Got back to the States. And like a lot of pilots, transferred that career into flying for, civilian airlines. In this case, it was Pan American. And it was during this time when he was deadheading. It was basically when he's just hitching a ride. He's not part of the crew. But one of the benefits of being being an employee is you get to hitch rides on planes that happen to be going your way. So he's in the back on this plane. He's going, it's over Syria when it goes down. The flight crew's killed. Got the kind of nose in. And suddenly he's in command here of this, of the situation here, and he's got to, shepherd all these survivors across the desert. And this is, late 40s or so. And he's got, he's injured himself. He's got some broken ribs. He didn't come through totally unscathed, but he's having to negotiate with the local Bedouin chieftains. No, don't get him everyone to safety. And it was in the it was quite written up. Everything, he came out legitimately as a hero. But that kind of like enough of flying. It's like regularly when he was on flying somewhere, he slamming them down. I was like, "What? You're afraid of flying?" No, I used to fly when these things. I know what happens. So if one person had a legitimate reason to get drunk on the flight, it's Gene. Again, his dad was an LA cop, I think, so it was like parlaying that too. Hey, my dad was a cop. I want to be one too. So he got into that. And again, I think there's still this thing of you wanted to be a writer, and to be a good writer, you got to rack up some life experience of some sort, either yourself, either your own, or get hooked up with people who do have it, so you can learn from them. Kind of tell their stories or anything. So he was a motorcycle cop. He worked the Bunko squad. He would get there where you see the worst of humanity. This is L.A. back in the bad old days, the 40s and 50s type, And after enough of that, in fact, that's where there was an incident where, again, this is where he's trying to get start as a writer. They don't want to carry a badge and a gun for the rest of his life. He wants to be a writer, And there's a thing where he's at this one bar where all the top name agents hang out, and it's inside the 50s, dark, the Bada Bing Club, doors burst open, so you got sunlight streaming in. The big, huge motorcycle cop. Roddenberry's over 6 foot, just in his stocking. So add on that all the leather jacket and the boots and the gear and the helmet and the mirrored sunglasses. Rides his motorcycle into the entryway there. Gets on the bike and says, Swifty Lazard! Swifty Lazard, one of the top agents in Hollywood ever. Okay? And so, but also, small guy, bald head, huge glasses, Think if anyone remembers, Larry Bud Melman from the old David Letterman days. Picture that kind of character. No hair. At least by the time I was aware of him. I don't know, he may have hair then, but it was big, beefy motorcycle cop just shouting out your name. It's like the Red Sea parted, and there's Swifty all by himself. Everyone else is, boom, walks up, pulls out a big manila envelope. You better read this. Plops it down on the bar, walks up, getting his bike, builds up, and then everyone cries, "What was it?" And he opens it up. It's a script. Do you know that guy? No, but that son of a bitch is going to get read now to that. That sort of thing. That sort of thing you do. Because everyone wants to sell a script somewhere. Then line forms to the left, goes around the block. So it's a very effective way of jumping the line. But Gene gets himself in as speechwriter for Chief Parker at the LAPD. And Chief Parker, arch conservative at the time, so very much law and order and crime, enforce the law and punish these bastards. Very hard nosed guy. And so Gene learned a thing about having to write speeches that would work for this guy, even if he probably diametrically opposed everything in it. You're writing for him. You're not. So it's kind of like very learned skill on how to write for others. Don't just write your own point of view. How to come at other points of view, and don't make them look like idiots. And because of that, he became kind of the liaison for shows wanting to do like Dragnet, for instance, or Mr. Highway, the Highway Patrolman, Mr. District Attorney. That's right, where they want to know how does it actually work. Are there some actual cases? Because there's always weird cases come across. Like you're not going to believe this shit. Like the truth is stranger than fiction. Well, it's again, the whole thing with Dragnet was the stories you're about to story you're about to see is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. Roddenberry was there with hey, here's a good one. And eventually, it's like, okay, I think I can write my own now, dealing with these guys. And he started doing something, under the name Robert Wesley. No, that was a pen name for him, because moonlighting was rather frowned upon at the LAPD at the time. But he started doing his own stuff, and like I said, some of the stuff for Mr. District Attorney was a show at the time. Highway Patrol was one, and also he first science fiction script he sold was something, The Secret Defense of 117. It's for like craft theater, one of these anthology things where they show a different story every name. And this is one. It had Ricardo Montalban in it. And one day I'm going to dig up what the story is all about and all that. I don't think there's any existing video copies out there. Maybe there are. On that front, I recommend Mission Log Podcast. They're doing the whole thing, genealogy, where they're going through his pre-Star Trek days. And see, kind of put together, see what led to Star Trek. And right now, they're doing a thing. The show he created, actually, that nobody knew about, but he had created a show before the time. But we'll get to that in a minute. But he started selling stuff and started to get a bit of a career, and enough to the point where he felt comfortable he could finally quit the LAPD and become a full-time writer. And he was a very in-demand writer at the time. A lot of westerns, but he really picked up on the show Have Gun Will Travel. He wrote like 23. He wrote more scripts for that show, like 23 scripts. He would later claim to become the head writer of that show. There was no head writer in that show. That's it. If there was, he probably would have been it, but there was no head writer. He did contribute more episodes to that show than anybody else, though. It's like 20-some scripts. But let me check here, because this is going to overlap some. Because while he's doing Have Gun Will Travel, let's see, it's 1957 to 1963. And while he's writing this, he did have a show of his picked up called Wrangler, 1960. It was kind of a mid-season thing. It wasn't necessarily. It didn't. It's like the Ford show, which sort of Ford was sponsoring one of the anthology shows, hosted by Tennessee Ernie Ford. Convenient. Well, they were off for the summer, and so they gave Roddenberry this slot of this Western in 1960. I think there was no real guarantee that they were going to be picked up for reveal, but it's like, let's give you this, see if you can prove yourself. And it started off because he'd already been recognized as a top-notch writer with Have Gun and other story, other strips, other stuff he's done. But this one is a little rougher, because you couldn't blame a story editor for this one, so it was a little rough here. It's like where Paladin was not a perfect character, outstanding, all these things, and very knowledgeable and very well read, but he did have, he wasn't perfect. This guy he had in there, Pitcairn, was the name. The case could be made. This guy was a bit of a Gary Sue. He was perfect in everything. He was more awesome than anyone. And they're doing this right now in Mission Log Podcast because they just came across this stuff. There's not much mention on IMDb. They can't even find. They found the script for the pilot, but they haven't found the tape. It was notable in the fact that it was the first Western done on videotape. Now, the on-set stuff looks like a soap opera of the time. The outdoors, the location stuff looks fantastic. That's just all on videotape. So they're still going through that, and it'll be interesting to see if some of the stuff starts coming to light. But that was the first created by Gene Roddenberry show, and it was a bit of a big deal because they found the script and it's in a fancy leather binder and everything. And this is while he's still doing stuff for Have Gun Will Travel on the side, though. So, and again, that just lasted like 9-10 weeks, and it's back to the regular year on Have Gun Will Travel. And that ran through, but he picked up from that, and pretty much after Have Gun, that's when he got a second shot with The Lieutenant. And for those not on the know, that was the story of a young Lieutenant William T. Rice. And yes, the T stood for Tiberius. It was revealed later on. Just life in the Marines in peacetime. And one of the things is they were able to get cooperation from the Pentagon to use Camp Pendleton as a location. So they didn't have to use backlots. They could use actual Marines marching in formation behind them. It saved a lot of money, a lot of time, and everything. And apparently it was a very well-regarded show, doing okay in the ratings. But it was kind of, they dealt with certain issues. They dealt with, people not understanding the Marine Corps type of thing, or trying to use it for their own ends. I think the one story that when he first met Leonard Nimoy, he'd been as a guest star as a flamboyant Hollywood producer, wanted to do a movie about the Marine Corps, and Rice is listed kind of as a technical advisor. Say, no, that's not how this worked. It would do this way. But Major Barrett was also in there as Nimoy's assistant. Although Major was there a lot more than just as that, because that comes up later with Star Trek. But they came to an episode called "To Set It Right," and this one was a bit thorny, mainly because it revolves around two Marines, Don Marshall, black recruit, and Dennis Hopper. Been around, I think he's a corporal by this point in the story. And it starts off, he's introduced, okay, there's, these are guys, these are your corporals. Well, there's some history between the Black Marines and Dennis Hopper, because he immediately jumps him right there in front of the squad room and everything, or the office. And Rice sets himself the mission. He's going to get these men to respect each other and behave. Now, he does get called on it because his Colonel Bainbridge, played by Robert Vaughn, and kind of calls on him about, you're wanting to do your little, social work here. This is on you, Lieutenant, if this goes bad. Okay, we're not here for this sort of thing. It's like it'd be simpler just to transfer him to somewhere else, or whatever. But Nichelle Nichols also this is her television debut, because the credits say introducing Nichelle Nichols, and she's playing his wife, or this guy's wife, and they shoot it, and then they get a word from the Pentagon saying, if you air this episode, we're pulling support. You will no longer have access to Camp Pendleton. You will not have access to Marine personnel, because they did not like the idea of a story depicting the Marines as having racists in their midst. And who's been in the military, it's like, really? We're going to completely deny reality then, huh? So, and NBC saying, it's like, no, you don't air this. We can't do. We need that support from the Pentagon to keep the cost down on here, and then just maintain good favor with the government. Well, Roddenberry thought this was an important story. It needs to be dealt with. And they're not saying the entire Marines, just these two guys. There's one guy. Problem with, but also they also point out that the black guy's got a bug up his ass too, because he gets jumped up by, I think Woody Strode plays. And you think, look, you don't know what we had to go through for you to be here. So cool your jets there, Sparky. You don't have as bad as you think you do. But Gene screened this episode for the NAACP, and they sang it up to the ring rafters. This needs to be aired out, and they kind of embarrassed NBC into airing it. You see various accounts saying, oh, it's so expensive. They never aired it. No, they aired it. They aired it, and they also aired it in summer repeats, too. And the Pentagon followed through. They pulled support. Now, there wasn't much left of the show anyway at that point. Towards the end of the season. But, for the remainders, if they had to, pull everything back, shoot on the back lot. Roddenberry's out there training extras into how to march right. But it was like, it wasn't so much that censorship was a big deal at the time. It was that television goes in cycles. If this had aired just a few years earlier, wouldn't have been any problem, really. Because television was handling weightier subjects at the time. But they were coming out of that, and they figured the people are tired of being preached at and lectured. They want just straight entertainment. So Roddenberry was really a little behind the times at that point. But he also started thinking, because he was familiar with Jonathan Swift and the way he was able to just skewer institutions like the royal family and Parliament and other things at the time, because he couched it in terms of Lilliputians and Winans and Yahoos and stuff, and it slipped right on by the people he was poking fun at. And actually, before this episode aired, it already hit the trades that Roddenberry was working on a sci-fi show. There was already a blurb in Variety in January, and the episode aired in February. So it was already known he was working on his own show. And it was going to be a sci-fi show. But it went through, and they did the run, and NBC pulled the plug on it. Again, it wasn't caught. The ratings were okay, but Roddenberry made them look like a bunch of racist bigots. And again, we're talking, New York and Hollywood elites, and they still wanted to be as progressive, and they wanted to push these things. But it's like they also got sponsors and such, investors that keep happy. So you can't put. It's like, no, don't, Gene, please. But it's like no, that's it, you're done. And so, Roddenberry, Lieutenant gets canceled. Robert Vaughn goes on to have do Man from U.N.C.L.E., like right afterwards. So Roddenberry starts going and working on his sci-fi idea, which becomes Star Trek. Like the first format was dated March of '64. I'll have to check the air day schedule, but I don't know when the last new episode of Lieutenant aired, but close, maybe a little bit before that. As some accounts, he shot it all over Hollywood in the very short sequence of time. Between the time he had this thing written and the MGM had first dibs, they passed on it, and it's pretty close when it wound up at Desilu. And at this point, Desilu is sitting there with a lot of empty sound stages. Like the only one really in regular use was for the Lucy show. And I think they had a couple of game shows here and there. And they wanted to start getting into more become a major player. So that they can do more stuff than just Lucy. And so they brought in Herb Solow, who was an NBC exec. Brought him in to say, bring us concept, bring us stuff. And right off the bat, he brings in Mission Impossible and Star Trek. Because Roddenberry comes in, does his pitch, and Solow's there, Herb Katz is there, I think maybe even Gene's agent, and they do it. Okay, yeah, we'll sign you with something here. We'll see what we can do with it. And this was for '64. If that had gone right, it would have premiered alongside Lost in Space. But again, you got the legendary pit where Oscar Katz gets so excited about this. He oh yeah, this is just what we want to do if it does a show. We can play with the big boys. He personally takes Roddenberry over to CBS. And of course, the story is, they're grilling him. How would you go about doing this type of show? And asking him all kinds of technical stuff about, like reproducing planets and stuff and doing the thing, And Roddenberry thought he was being helpful and helping his case by saying, we can do this and this, And it wasn't until like the end when, well, yeah, thanks for all that, very interesting, but we decided to go with the show we've already got called Lost in Space. It's like, yeah, basically they had questions about Lost in Space, and Roddenberry gave them a how-to guide of how to go about doing it. He felt very used. So it's like, go back. It's like, okay, well, that didn't work. You only had 3 networks at the time, and the feeling was that CBS was the inside shot because Lucy and CBS go back to the radio days, and I Love Lucy was the #1 show for a long time, and the Lucy show was doing pretty well too. So they kind of felt CBS had like first dibs on anything they'd come out with. So Herb, it's like, Oscar, let me handle this. We only got 2 shots left. I don't know anybody at ABC, but I still got buddies at NBC. Let me do this. And told Roddenberry, don't say anything unless directly, just shut up. Let me do the talking. And it's like, so like, just sit there and look pretty. And Herb is the one who, when again, all the execs at NBC, Mort, Grant Tinker, Mort Warner, all that, they knew Herb. They knew Herb Solow. They were friends with him. So they said, as in deference to him is why they went in and bought Star Trek. because they didn't want to deal with Roddenberry again after that whole thing with with the lieutenant. So it's kind of like, okay, Herb, you're the one who's going to run herd on him, okay? Because we dealt with him before and it wasn't fun. He doesn't like to play by the rules, and we got to play if we're going to keep this thing going. We got so they went through it, okay, and they submitted some scripts for pilots. NBC picked The Cage, and it comes back like, and the idea was this was going to be the hardest one that they're going to pull off. If they can pull this off, then they got something. But this will be the toughest one. So I was like, you want a show? Do this one. If you can do this, then we'll talk. And again, it was sold as kind of a space western. Wagon Train to the Stars. It wasn't referred to being as a wagon train. It was like the show Wagon Train, because it wasn't just the fact that recurring characters but different guest stars every week. It also, this was considered quality television. You'd have big name people guest starring on Wagon Train. Well, they did it, and they delivered the pilot. And no, it wasn't the action adventure shoot 'em up that Gene kind of promised them, but they did pull it off. They made a very compelling story. The production levels were up there, and it was like Mort Warner and Herb Solow had to talk. It's like talking about, well, okay, did we? Yeah, well, we kind of sandbagged you there, Herb. We didn't think we picked the one because it was the hardest one. We didn't think you'd be able to pull it off, but you kind of did. So we're kind of at a quandary here. And Herb's, well, we'll just do a second pilot. Okay, fine, you got it. That was it. Contrary to the legend, second pilots were not unheard of or unprecedented. It's as old as television itself. Again, trying to turn radio shows into TV shows. There was one that went through like 4 or 5 pilots. Lumber shows went through two or three. Like Fibber McGee and Molly went through like 3. There was a spinoff. The Ray Gildersleeve went through a couple, and other ones like shows that never went anywhere, but still went through a couple of months because they really wanted to make this thing work. One of them shows like I forget the title, but it's like he was going to star Vincent Price and Peter Lorre. It's like that could have been a good show. They tried, and in fact, at the time, they got approved to make make The Way No Man Has Gone Before, do a second pilot for Star Trek. Desilu was making a second pilot of a sitcom idea for NBC. So not only was it not unprecedented, it was a little unusual. But it was not unprecedented, it wasn't unusual, and in fact it was being done at the very same time by the very same studio for the very same network. So frankly, Bob Justman should have known better when he made those unprecedented now, president then, unprecedented now. No, Bob, they were doing the same thing across the lot. And it didn't send shockwaves through the industry. It's a 4th paragraph on a blurb about what's going on in Hollywood. Oh, and by the way, Desilu's doing another Star Trek for NBC, and they're also doing a second pilot for this, for this thing. He was like, yeah, by the way, this is also happening. No one was shocked. It happened all the time. And in fact, that happened quite a bit after Star Trek 2. All in the Family went through like 3 or 4. The Dick Van Dyke Show went through a couple. So yeah. But it was kind of like, there was a telegram from Oscar Katz at the point, but hey, good luck. Let's make it good this time. Sort of poking them a little bit there. So, but they got it. And they showed, okay, yeah, we can do the shoot 'em up too, it wrapped up with Bill Shatner in a fist fight with a god. And they got it and started off, and production started really around June, I think, of 66. Yeah, the first pilot was 64, second pilot 65. And then all the rank, and then, okay, now you got, because part of it is also, they shot the first 2 pilots at another location, at another lot across town. For the regular production, they pulled everything back to the the lot literally next door to Paramount, the main Desilu's lot, the old RKO lot, and that transporting all those sets over there, fixing them up, adding more. and things started. Like because September 8th, 1966, that was really a sneak preview week. The official premiere wasn't until the 15th, but this was sneak preview week, and they're going through. And originally, I'm pretty sure, I'm quite confident, neither pilot was really intended to go on air because there's so many changes in both of them between that and what happened in the regular show. They're completely different shows look like. And if things had worked right and there wasn't hold up in getting effects done, the Corbomite maneuver was certainly written to be essentially the third pilot. This was going to be the first episode. Because you can tell by the dialogue, they're setting everything up, all the relationships, and explaining the mission, the ship, and all that. So it's like, this is like, if you know nothing about this, and again, this is going to be the first one, this explains everything. And it ends properly with, instead of blowing the bad guys away, it's like you go out and then make a new friend. But reality was something different. The effects were not ready in time. In fact, the Corbomite maneuver didn't run for several weeks later because it took so damn long to get those effects right. So it's like, the air date's coming close. What do you got, guys? Not much. They had The Man Trap, The Naked Time, Enemy Within, Charlie X, and I think Mud's Women. And of those, it's like, Mud's Women, that's a mail order bride story. Charlie X is not that compelling. Enemy Within, that was, do you want to really present your leading man captain in this way? No. Naked Time, you got to kind of know these characters first before you can appreciate what they're going through. That pretty much left The Man Trap. Where you got, okay, well, we got a, creepy monster terrorizing the crew, and so yeah, it's the closest thing we got to a decent show to lead off with. Okay, so that's why they went with Man Trap. And the reviews were somewhat savage. A lot of people did not get it, which, understand. It was a very different show, from what everyone else thinks. Because again, at this point, the only big sci-fi shows on the air at the time was Lost in Space. And it was Irwin Allen stuff. I'm not sure where Time Tunnel was there, but Time Tunnel was in. I think Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea was, going there, but it was his kind of, it was all action stuff, and very little detail with the plot and characters. So they go, and the ratings were good. They started off pretty damn good. They had a hit on their hands, but they kind of went to the middling area for a while. It was never the ratings disaster of Legend, though. They were mostly kind of mediocre, and it settled around number 50, 52, I think, at the end of the year. But that's just raw numbers. And the demographic thing has also been overplayed. They knew who was watching. They knew it was college students now. I don't think they fully appreciated where the spending power really was. I think they were still thinking it was mostly with housewives. Like, they figured they controlled the spending in the house. I think, no, really, no. Most of the spending actually comes from these guys. So that's, that was until 1970 when they figured it out. But they're going along, and again, the rate, a lot of times it was like they won the night frequently. But again, it was not the boffo ratings they really needed for a show as expensive as that was. And all the thing about low budget. No, it wasn't low budget. It wasn't adequately budgeted for what they needed to do. But the thing is, they had to create pretty much everything from scratch. Very little was, they couldn't really go down to Sears and buy Starfleet uniforms. They had to make them themselves. And Bill Tice was not given a lot of money to work with. He was using very unusual fabrics. Partly, again, it's unusual, but also because this stuff was cheap. Okay. It's like some of the stuff, like, the environmental suits in Naked Time. That's shower curtain material. Okay. And even went on into the third season with Ilana Troyes. It's like, it's pretty clear. The Elysian Guards, they've got placemats glued on them, okay? Little cheap, plastic, translucent placemats. They had to do very unusual things. Some of the set decorations, like it was lids for takeout dishes that they went, said, gave a kid $2, go down to the comic shop, get me a sleeve of lids. You know, there's paint them thing, put them a thing. You're not going to dwell on me. I'm going to focus. It's a manufactured shape on the wall, and it works. And stuff like that. And they were also regularly raiding Mission Impossible's dumpsters because they're literally right next door. And they'd get something come in. It's like the plastic shipping container, styrofoam shipping packing stuff. It's like they'd toss it. It's like, hey, and they see them stacked up on the walls in engineering. Because that kind of goes to Roddenberry's real genius was not as a writer but as a producer. He would do get some concepts, scripts, middling. It's kind of often, hit or miss. Like Justman would say, a typical Roddenberry script would be brilliant. The teaser, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 starts getting a little weird. And by Act 4, you can kind of tell he's reached about halfway down the bottle of bourbon. And I think The Omega Glory is probably a pretty good example of that. It starts off like a very compelling story. What happened to the crew of the Exeter? What's going on? Captain Tracy, whoa, he's interviewing with what's going on? And then by the time what? Shatner's reading the Constitution? When the hell did this come in? The guy walks in with an American flag. What? That one mainly suffers because there was a bit cut out there. There was a line about we could, this is very possibly, example of one of those lost colony ships from, the 21st century. It was an American and Chinese colony went out and they got like, this could be them. Like, that would have explained a lot, But they're going along. And originally, Roddenberry was producing the show himself. But it was clear pretty much that, no, this is a very backbreaking show. They need to bring in a regular line producer. And eventually, I think they went through a couple of guys. John D. F. Black, I think, was doing a lot. He was mainly script editor, story editor. And he got pissed at Roddenberry, constantly rewriting stuff all the time. But he understood. He was usually right. But it's like the way he went about it, it's like you're really not, making it really hard to deal with the writers. With the prime example being Harlan Ellison and City on the Edge of Forever. Because a lot of writers just they do this job, just take their name off it and use a pseudonym. Harlan was like he was one of the first writers to sign up. He was when Roddenberry showed the pilots at Tricon in '66. Harlan was one of the guests of honor. It's like, hey, sign me up. I want a part of this because they've been claiming, please, intelligent sci-fi and television. Please, enough of these, wisecracking robots and smart-ass kids. In fact, I've got the letter, he sent out from the committee saying, hey, the show's already in trouble. We need to, rally. And Harlan, he was one of the earliest one. There's elements in there of stuff that they, this later on. Like being able to control the transporter from your communicator. But there's some good stuff. And he had Yeoman Rand holding the fort while Kirk and Spock go back down and try to save the day. But he, one of the things is you do not rewrite Harlan Ellison. And when he found out he was being rewritten by somebody else, he shows up at Roddenberry's office. He, while he's waiting in the outer office, he fashions a hangman's noose, hangs it up just outside the door, so when he opens the door, he's going to see it. So he walks in, there's the noose, he points and says, tell me someone didn't touch my words. And so I was like, okay, fine. Hand it back to him. And they ran out of money because the writer, you get paid for the story, then you get paid for the first draft, and then if you do more rewrites, you get paid for that too. Well, they ran out of money to pay him for rewrites. He said, no, I will do it for free. I will do it gratis. Just let me keep my story. And they went through several drafts. That like this was one of the. If it had went smoothly, it would have been one of the first episodes aired. Instead, it was next to the last because it took that long to keep going. They stick him in a closet back behind Bill Theis's wardrobe stuff. The night watchman had come in and finally they said he's like sitting there with eyes like a couple of poached eggs, working on the story. But I was like going through, Gene Coon took a run at it. Harlan blew a stack. They figured most of the, supposedly Roddenberry himself did the final rewrite. But I think a large part of what we saw was from Dorothy Fontana. No, Roddenberry stuck in stuff. Like Edith's little speech about one day we'll be harness great powers, even maybe the adamant sort of thing. It's like that's not the character. And that then that's stuff a legend. Harlan does himself in a book. I could have traped that over there, but talking about what he went through, and a lot of afterwards from people with David Gerald, Dorothy Fontana, and others who dealt with him. And this, if this had been like Outer Limits or Twilight Zone, it probably would have gone unchanged for the most part. But the fact is, we have to live with these characters next week. You're up to something else, and our audience come back. Well, yeah, we just saw Kirk try and dump the entire galaxy and universe over some dame. Why are we going to listen to him anymore? You got to make him a hero. He's got to stand with him. And Roddenberry's also big. No, we need heroes. Enough of this cynical crap. It's like, the anti-hero. No, we need genuine heroes to look up to. Someone to aspire to be. So going along, the sale of Desilu to Gulf Western. Paramount did not buy Desilu. Paramount was bought along with Desilu by Gulf Western, which is mainly a sugar company. No background in entertainment at all. But it was the thing of the day to buy a movie studio to diversify things. But again, the owner of the thing is very much a type A micromanager type. Trying to tell these guys how to do their job. Now Paramount had been around a good deal longer. They knew how to defend themselves against these guys, and they were convinced, no, we have to do it this way. This is how it works. Okay, Desilu, not so much. They got pushed around a bunch. I think they also, I think Gulf West probably put their own people in it too. And also, by the time of the merger, Desilu was not going under. It was the most profitable year in decades. They made more money the year they sold the Gulf West than they made previously. God knows how long. So no, Star Trek did not break the studio. They were not going under. They weren't going bankrupt. There wasn't this like, we got to sell. What show's going to kill us? No, they were making money out of it. There's one just Lucy was just getting a little burned out from trying to run a studio. It's like, don't let me out of this. Let me just do my show. You can run the thing. I'm had it with these guys. But they made the syndication deal with Kaiser during the second season. I think the head of Kaiser Broadcasting, he had missed out on getting the deal for the Twilight Zone. His kids were nuts by him, but he tried to get, but he was too late. So he was damn sure he's going to get Star Trek, and so that got signed up. He nailed that down, but it's like, but this puts a thing when the third season's going along. Like, they've already got the syndication deal set up. So there's a lot of, they're just going through the motions at this point. They don't want to spend any more money than they have to because they're not trying to win anymore. They know this third year, that's it. We're going to, send it reruns and it's a pure profit at that point. So there wasn't much interest from the studio's perspective of trying to build the show up anymore. We're done. You just run it out, move on to something else. Strike the sets, move on somebody else. So that's kind of plays in the thing of the network. Again, they did promise originally that third season the show was going to air Monday nights 7:30. But upon further reflection, they're looking at this and it's like, okay, wait a minute. Monday nights they're going up against Gunsmoke and the Lucy Show. These are top 10 shows, okay? And Star Trek is not in that league at this point. And again, at that point, they were doing something an hour long. They started at the half hour. Nobody's going to leave Gunsmoke halfway through to go watch Star Trek on NBC. And also, as far as, the Friday Night Death Slot, that does go back to the time. In the final chapters of the making of Star Trek, they're bemoaning the fact that they're being sent to Friday nights at 10. But look at it from the network's perspective here. If they put it on Monday nights, that was a kamikaze slot. They might not have made it halfway through the season if they'd been up there because they would have been trashed. And also, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. had been having trouble early in the week and early in the night, so they put it at Friday nights 10, and it shot to number 13. And that wasn't a cheap show either. and it had roughly the same audience as Star Trek. So they're thinking, well, hell, it worked for Uncle. It could probably work for Star Trek. Just put it down there, see if it finds its audience there. Because again, Friday nights at 10, it's like, because they also knew it was primarily kids watching this show. So late night, Friday nights has the advantage. It's not a school night. They can stay up and watch it. So you won't lose your audience that way. College students, well, they're not all going out on dates, okay? Some of them are, lonely nerds who are staying home and they're watching, So it was a calculated risk. And again, not unwarranted. Again, a lot of shows have been in that very time slot and done very well. Again, Man from U.N.C.L.E. just a couple years earlier became a hit in that time slot. But Roddenberry had agreed to come back and produce the show himself, to be the line producer, because they had lost Gene Coon, for reasons we won't go into here. Then he felt in order, because he was going to have to deal with people in the future, he had to stick by his word. He said that if you give the Friday night slot, I won't come back and produce the show. I'll, get somebody else, but I will not produce it. And they wouldn't budge. And I think there was also a factor of NBC preferred dealing with George Schlatter at Laugh-In than with Roddenberry. And again, also, it makes a little more sense. Don't try and counter one action-adventure show with another action-adventure show. You're splitting your audience that way at best. You go with a slapstick vaudeville-type comedy like Laugh-In, you're not pulling the same people. So you can find your own audience in there, people who don't want to watch, James Arness riding into town one more time. But watch a comedy, then okay, yeah. And it found its thing. They worked. Although Roddenberry, that Inside Star Trek album, did, if you had to do it over again, he probably would actually come back and do it. Considering that what Fred Freiberg and his bunch did to the show, it's like their way was not the same way as our, and they didn't do the same thing. There were a lot of things that didn't work right. And again, at that point, it would have been irrelevant though, because the show was the fate of the show was pretty much set in stone, unless they really did take off, which I think they would have had a chance to if they'd maintained the quality. They probably would have maintained. But the thing is, with Roddenberry stepping aside, Freiberger doing his best, but a bit ham-fisted, the quality started dropping, and the fans picked up on it eventually. It's like, this show really kind of sucks now. The ratings finally take a nosedive. Till finally it was like an 8. An 8 rating, whereas previously it had been over a 16 when they started. Now they would kill for an 8, but but it pretty much just, okay, that's it, wrap up, we're done. And let it, some other rerun contracts run out for a while before Kaiser gets in, and then 72 or so they start running. Or 73, because I know I was catching repeats on Channel 9 in Saturday afternoons. And Channel 9 was an ABC station, so it's like they were just shuffling around. They didn't start, the big rerun push didn't start really until like 74. Because in between time, they had been dealing with, talking to Filmation about a cartoon version of Star Trek, even back during, on third season. Because they've been doing shows like that at the time. But at that point they was talking about stuff like little kid versions alongside the adult version. It's like, it was a kind of, cadets on the Enterprise type of thing, and Roddenberry didn't really go for that. So that one went nowhere. The development stuff is out there, but it just never went anywhere. So there was already a connection with Roddenberry at that, to that point when Star Trek, goes into little bit of reruns in certain markets. It didn't hit here until after the cartoon had run, but they started doing major, hey, this is taking off here. This is a big thing. And NBC was like, okay, well, all right, maybe we goofed. Can we bring it back? Well, the sets had already been struck and distributed, and UCLA got some things and other things, and the cast is all out doing other things now. But there's the, hey, what about, this cartoon idea of Filmation? Okay, well, let's come back to that. And by this time around, they're saying, no, no kids on the ship. If we're doing it, we're doing it. It's not gonna be a kiddie Star Trek. It's gonna be Star Trek in animated form. Because we got scripts that we had purchased in anticipation that we got a fourth season. So we got some of those. And also, at the time, there was a writer's strike going on. And the same rules applied then as applied now, is that animation is not included in what you can and can't work for. So that's how they got a lot of original series writers to contribute scripts to the Star Trek cartoon game, because they could do it without necessarily breaking the strike. And they got, and again, voice actor. Only once or twice did they had them all together in the room. A lot of times it was like they're recording the lines separately. Shatner, a lot of times, was doing his lines into a tape recorder in between takes on what he was doing at the time, usually Barbary Coast. It's like, but, okay, take 5, and he's in his trailer recording his lines for a Star Trek thing. Things like that. And, of course, the cast is all for it because, hey, they're getting paid. They're making money here. It's not just having to go to a convention. But it shows, okay, well, all right, we got a market. It's a test thing. There is a viable market out there. So it kept, and Rodmer's right, it kept the thing alive. It showed, yes, there's interest here. And yeah, a lot of things, always keeping in mind on bringing this whole thing back in live action when the time is right and when everyone's available. And that first season, like 16 episodes. Second season is only 6. That's why I do not consider 4th and 5th season of original series. I consider it just a 4th because there's only 22 episodes total. So that's there, and that's why I will throw Star Trek Continues as the 5th season, because that it fills the thing. Like we need, the goal was finish up the 5-year mission, get everyone where they were at the beginning of the motion picture. Find out why Spock went back to Vulcan, what happened to McCoy, when the uniforms come in, and why they refit the Enterprise so heavily. But they got the cartoon. It was a hit. It got its first Emmy for not one of the Geek Awards. It wasn't a technical thing. I think they had gotten stuff earlier for technical achievements or whatever, but this is the first one. It was like best children's programming. And I think there was a comment, like the animated Star Trek show is like a Mercedes and a soapbox derby. But at that point, okay, we did it. So now the talks start to do it for real on live action. And that's when you start, Barry Diller as head of Paramount by this point. He wants to do a 4th network. And he sees Star Trek as a good anchor show for, flagship show for starting it off. And so that's when you start in phase 2. And also this talk, occasionally it's bounced back between a new TV series or a low-budget feature film, then a medium-budget feature film, or then a TV movie, and just bouncing back and forth there. But during this time, they've got pretty much all the cast except for Nimoy signed up. And they're on pay-and-play contracts there, so they're getting paid whether anything happens or not. And they're finally settled on, okay, phase, new series, network. This is where Star Trek Phase 2 comes in. And they're buying scripts, they're building sets, doing, Tice is pulling costumes out of storage because they had, original series costumes, and also creating a few and playing a few concepts of variations on it. Because then this story only takes place like 3 years after the original series wraps up, after the 5-year mission. But they're flying around, and it's like there's having problems getting stations signed up to be part of this new Paramount network. So it's looking like we don't, this isn't going to work, do it. But they don't tell the people working on Star Trek yet. There's like, we want to do something here. But they also can't publicly announce that, okay, never mind this network, because then everyone's going to hold it over our heads. Oh, Mr. High and Mighty want to do a new network, and now you want to sell us a show? Really now? It's like, so they had to keep up a brave front here. But they get the thing, and the script for what was going to be, I hate to call it a pilot, because really the show was already sold. A pilot is what you do to sell a show. It was going to be just the first episode. That's really the better term for it. So the thing, In Thy Image, it was bounced off of a story idea I think was for Genesis 2 called Robots Return, where an Earth probe comes back as Ben advancing and all that. And the script shows up, and Michael Eisner, then head of Paramount, I guess Barry Diller was kind of, no, you go do something. No, Michael Eisner's in charge, and slams up. We've been looking for trying to do a Star Trek movie. This is the script. And it's like, okay, fine. So now it's like, okay, we're doing a movie then. Because around this time, well, actually, it was just before Star Wars hit. Because Star Wars hit, and they figured, well, shit, we just lost our shot. So they're about ready to pull the plug out then. Okay, no, but then Close Encounters hit. And did just about as well as Star Wars. People forget all that. Because at that point, it's like, the attitude was that fans of this type of thing will only go see like one movie a year. That sort of thing. But it's the fact that you had two movies making just as much money, and the same audience people come back over, and it's, they'll come, okay, we're back on. And so, got back on, and now it's a mad dash to get this thing filmed. And then you got all the rewrites and the thing. They started filming before they even had a finished script. That D. Kelly was on Tomorrow. They're talking about the upcoming thing. Roddenberry's supposed to be there, but I think he was sick or something. But he sent a note to D, said, okay, we've got a start date. We don't have a script yet, but hell, a lot of people have scripts and don't have a start date. So, but they went out, they're filming. They're trying to figure out, what to do with the last film, with the last act. But I think we're going to leave it there, because I'm going to do a separate one on the movies. But that's the state of Star Trek at the point of where they wrapped up after the series, and after the series and how they get to, okay, now we're going to make a movie. So, we'll continue on with part 2, and we'll talk at you later.